Hello, my lovelies. As has been requested, this will be a re-recording of chapters 4 to 6 for Ignore the Dementor by NinjaPandaScholar on AO3. I hope you'll enjoy. Chapter 4, Return to Hogwarts. Harry was sad to leave his new haven. Everyone else, especially Sirius, who was still stuck there, was itching to leave. Harry wished that Sirius could see the house the way he did. It just had personality and some interesting quirks. Creature was really the only unpleasant thing about the place, and Harry had only seen him the one time he'd run away screaming. He thought he saw the elf a few times out of the corner of his eye, or leaving a room as soon as he entered, but he couldn't be sure. Even Sirius' mother was fine. You just needed to know how to handle her. Like unleashing his full aura at the painting in the middle of the night, until she was as much afraid of him as Creature. But yeah, problem handled. It wasn't just leaving the safety and comfort of Grimmauld Place. It was also leaving Sirius and going into the unknown by himself essentially. He wasn't 100% sure his magic would work. He was worried all the house elves would scream and run. He was certain Ron and Hermione would eventually figure out what was going on. What if Jamie got hurt and he had to go to Madame Pomfrey and she figured it all out? And what if Voldemort attacked it again? Also, what did that Dementor mean when he said, "We'll see you again"? Really, how ominous can you get? If all that weren't enough, what if he sucked all the happiness out of his friends and they were miserable and suffering from Dementor exposure by the end of the year? It was with even more fear than when he started in first year that Harry pulled his trunk down the stairs and made ready to leave for Hogwarts to start his 5th year. Has anyone seen Crookshanks? I haven't seen him in days, Hermione asked frantically as she ran through the house trying to collect her wayward cat. Harry shrank into the corner, knowing the cat was hiding from him. It was a similar reaction as Creature when he saw it in the hallway a few days before. Thankfully, no one had been there to witness it that time. "I'm going to miss you around here, pup," Sirius said dejectedly as he joined Harry in the corner. "Maybe Snuffles can come visit you during the year," he added with a hopeful grin. His first instinct was to yell at Sirius to not be an idiot and stay away where he was safe. On second thought, though, that was probably asking too much of the man that was nowhere near emotionally stable. Feeling Sirius' emotions, as he had everyone since he fed, Harry knew better than anyone that staying isolated was draining the life from his godfather. He seemed to be constantly fighting severe depression and anxiety. Granted, the man still called him James occasionally, but Harry loved him regardless. The man was as unstable as he was, emitted strong emotions that he cared for and loved Harry and maybe for being James' son, but Harry was certain that in the more lucid moments Sirius was cognizant of the difference between Harry and James. He just wasn't always in one of those more lucid moments. "Oh, Padfoot, please don't get yourself arrested," Harry sighed tiredly, giving up on the man staying put in the house. "I'd really hate to have to break you out of Azkaban. It completely ruined my reputation with the Ministry. Well, what's left of it anyway." Harry actually thought about that statement for a minute before continuing. "I guess there's not much left to ruin. Sure, I guess I'll get you out, but please don't try to get arrested anyway. Let's save that as a last resort." As a Dementor, Harry was certain he could break his godfather out, but he really didn't have to try it. The other Dementors might not take too kindly to it. However, it might be nice to go on the run with Sirius to some tropical climate where it was warm and people were happy. It might not be the backup plan. Awesome! Sirius exclaimed happily and gave Harry the largest smile he'd ever seen on his godfather's face. The first prison break was hard enough, though. I'm good with not doing that again anytime soon. Yeah, sure. Harry chuckled. If you decide to visit, just owl me first so I can meet you with the map. Okay? Sure thing. Sirius was almost vibrating in excitement at that. And no living in caves and eating rats. Harry chided him. I'll hide you in Snape's office or something before then. He grinned broadly. Sirius fell over laughing. Oh, Merlin! I can't just imagine Sniffles coming into his office, sitting under his desk. This house really isn't that bad. Give it a chance, will you? For me? Harry asked pleadingly. I want to come back and visit, and that'll be hard if you hate the place. Harry, I gave the place a chance for the first 16 years of my life. I don't think its charms are going to wear off on me. Sirius sobered and steered Harry to the group leaving the house since Hermione had finally found Crookshanks in a kitchen cupboard. Be good, Padfoot. Cause hell for Snape, Harry. Sirius waved with a parting. Ron and Hermione abandoned Harry as soon as they boarded the train for the prefect's duties. He wasn't upset, though, since he was hoping to find an empty compartment to hide from the students for a while since he was already starting to feel a little hungry. Everyone was just a little too happy to see their friends again. Unfortunately, the Grimold group had been running late and were some of the last to board. Every compartment he saw had at least one person in it. Feeling the emotions around him, Harry felt around for a compartment that didn't make him hungry, and was also fairly empty. He ended up looking into the window of a compartment that only had one girl in it with blonde hair, reddish earrings, and who was reading a magazine upside down. Harry shrugged dismissively. This girl's level of strangeness didn't even scratch the surface of his own, and the emotions coming from her compartment were pure peace and calm. So he pushed the door open and stuck his head in. Hi, do you mind if I join you? Fair warning, there will be probably 2 prefects popping in after a while if you say yes. The girl looked over her magazine at him with the most brilliant blue eyes he had ever seen. She smiled in a vague way and motioned to the seat in front of her. You are very welcome, Harry Potter, she said kindly and a little formally. Harry grinned and sat across from her. I don't think I've met you before, or have I? And I'm making a fool of myself. The girl's eyes seemed just a little off focus as they looked at him, like she was looking through him. I'm Luna Lovegood, and no, I don't think we've officially met before. I would remember. Well, it's good to meet you then, Luna. Nodded and situated Hedwig's empty cage in the overhead compartment, since she had decided to fly to Hogwarts instead of being cooped up inside the train. You too. I'm sorry that you really must feel uncomfortable here, Luna stated sadly as she picked up her magazine and stared at it upside down once more. Harry sat back down and looked at the girl confused for a moment or two. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm pretty comfortable here in the compartment with you. Luna flashed him a dazzling smile. No, I mean carrying a body around you. that you aren't attached to. It has to be very uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that are too big, I would imagine. Harry basically choked on air and figured that if he didn't die by choking, then it would be of a heart attack. What do you mean, carrying around the body? He asked very slowly, really hoping he'd misunderstood. In response, Luna pushed her blonde curls behind her ears. That was away from the compartment door. The ear was very normal, if not exceptionally cute. She then waved her hand over it and a glamour peeled away, revealing a dramatically pointed ear that reached up into her hair. "Whoa, that's bloody awesome!" Harry exclaimed, leaning forward a bit to see her ear better. It was extremely cool looking. "Thank you," she said, and another wave of her hand reapplied the glamour. "I'm a fairy. There are wings too, but those are more noticeable to just appear in a train compartment." "I'd imagine." The Dementor smiled in awe. "I don't think I've ever met a fairy before. At least I didn't know they were one if I did." Luna smiled kindly at him. "Fairies see what others disregard. We see how magic interacts with the world around us and how all beings are interconnected," she explained with a faraway look. "You're letting too many Wexperts in. You really must get rid of some of those." He stared for a moment, not knowing where to even start with all of that. He had only chosen this compartment because it was peaceful. That peace was still strangely there, even if Harry was both worried and utterly confused. Um, so does that mean you know what I am?" He finally decided to ask first. Luna nodded with a smile. "Of course. Dementors are part of magic, just like all beings are." "And you aren't afraid of me?" he asked nervously, not really sure why the strange girl's opinion suddenly mattered so much to him, but it did. And you aren't afraid of me." "Why would I be?" she giggled. "Oh, Harry, maybe you should talk to a Dementor before you decide they're all the embodiment of evil. Have you ever actually sat down and had a conversation with a Dementor before?" Having had many horrible experiences with Dementors, he completely disregarded that suggestion as ludicrous and instead laughed. "Yeah, I don't think that's the best idea." He pictured showing up to Azkaban and asking if a Dementor wanted to go for tea. Changing the subject before he started laughing again, he asked, "What's a Wexpert?" "They are negatively charged magic," Luna explained as she finally closed her magazine. "Those who've given in to negative emotions emit them, and then those negative emotions are and when those negative emotions are about yourself, you let them in. You already have too many people sending Wexperts your way. You shouldn't add your own into the mix. Negative feelings you have about yourself do nothing to better you. They only let you in more pain and compound the problem." Feeling like he'd just had a therapy session, Harry took a deep breath. This strange girl accepted him, told him to let go of his negative feelings about himself, and listened. He wished he had met Luna Lovegood years before. Thank you, Luna," he said with all the feeling he could muster into the sentence. "You're welcome, Harry Potter." She nodded and picked up her magazine once more. He pulled his wand out of his pocket after a couple of minutes, staring out the window and thinking about what his new friend had said. "Luna, do you mind if I try some magic? I don't know if I can still cast spells like I am now. I'm really worried I'm going to get to Hogwarts and they'll just send me back, or worse, send me off to guard Azkaban." Luna once more put her magazine in such a way that said she'd rather have been talking to him anyway. "You're still connected to magic. You just need to tap back into that connection," she assured him. Harry nervously pointed his wand at her magazine and called out, Wingardium Leviosa. The magazine shook a little but didn't stir, to Harry's horror. Try releasing your aura just a bit. Not enough to lower the temperature, but enough to loosen your hold. I promise you won't hurt me. Luna assured him. You have such a tight hold on your magic. You're not letting any of it out right now. Even more nervous, Harry loosened his tightly held reins on his aura and tried again. This time the magazine rose up into the air as it should. Harry smiled as Luna clapped excitedly across from him. Bravo, Harry! She called out. She made him feel like he just survived the dragon in the first task of the Triwizard Tournament instead of casting a first-year levitation charm. And Harry was certain this girl was going to be his friend if he had anything to say about it. Thank you so much, Luna. Harry gushed as the magazine floated down again. It then came to him, and he was very interested to hear the answer. Hey, sorry, I meant to ask, are there a lot of fairies at Hogwarts? Luna laughed and picked up her magazine. She shook her head and continued laughing as she turned the page. Harry wasn't sure if that was a yes or a no, but smiled at her anyway, knowing absolutely nothing about fairies and really hoping there turned out to be more around the school, only if they were just like Luna, though. It didn't take long before the compartment door was pushed open again. Harry looked up expecting to see Ron or Hermione. Instead, Neville Longbottom smiled broadly at them. Both of them. Harry! Luna! I didn't know you knew each other, he said, coming in and plopping down beside Luna. We're new friends. Luna smiled at him over the magazine. Good summer? Neville shrugged. My greenhouses are doing great, and Gran and Uncle Algie are as they always are. I'm sorry, Neville, but I'm never going to like your Uncle Algie, Luna commented with a frown, as if this were a common argument they had. Throwing someone out of a window to see if they have magic is unacceptable. Whether you have magic or not, you're part of the family and should have been treated with respect. You should have come to stay with me and Daddy over the summer. Harry frowned. He never even questioned Neville's stories about his family. If he were being honest with himself, it was because Neville's home life wasn't too much different from his own. Maybe even a little better. At least Neville's Uncle Algie could use magic to save and or heal his nephew if he hadn't used magic to bounce. When Dudley had pushed Harry out of a window, Harry was just lucky he'd been able to grab onto a tree limb to keep himself from falling. While Harry was putting some serious thought into what Neville had told him about his home life and what was acceptable treatment of a family member, meant Neville was explaining how things had gotten a bit better and the new plants he was cultivating. You should grow some dirigible plums, the blonde suggested. They keep the nargles away and you could use that over the summer. Are nargles like Rexperts? Harry asked, coming back into the conversation. Nargles are those who've let the Wexperts take over. Luna grinned, happy he'd made the connection. How have we never met before, Luna? With a smile. He really liked his new friend, and apparently she was friends with Neville as well. Why hadn't they all been hanging out? Was he really that oblivious he'd missed her? I'm Ravenclaw, she shrugged, and a year younger than you. Neville put an arm around Luna and laughed. Once she's claimed you as a friend, there's no going back, though. Not that anyone would want to. The door was pushed open again as Ron's red hair made an appearance. Hey, Harry! Nev and Luna! Ron blushed at the end, and when Harry and Neville both glared at him. The prefect meeting was so dull! Hermione exclaimed. She pushed in behind Ron. Hermione! Harry sighed with a roll of his eyes. I've already told you I didn't want to be a prefect. You don't have to downplay how much you'll like it for me. Hermione smiled and sat on the one side of Harry while Ron took the other. Well, in that case, I'm so excited. We get to patrol the corridors right after curfew and are in charge of the first years. Ron groaned dramatically. We have to hang out with Malfoy, who's also a prefect. I wonder who actually picked the prefect, Harry mused. Malfoy has decent grades, but he's gotten in almost as many fights as I have. Ron's gotten in more. Neville chuckled. Yeah, mate. You should be the one that has to deal with the first years. Ron told Neville to Harry's surprise. He didn't realize his friend actually agreed with him. Sure, my family's super happy, but, my patience isn't exactly legendary. More like infamous. Harry gave his shoulder a shove. Neville and Luna shared some sort of look, but it was largely unreadable. Nah, I'm fine just trying to make it through this last year of potions. Neville finally said in a calm tone. I'm never going to pass it on my own, so at least I don't have to take it next year. Besides, my Gran and Professor McGonagall have a bit of a feud going on. I'm not saying that factored in the decision at all, but it's a mark against me anyway. Seriously? How's this the first we've ever heard about that feud? Harry raised an eyebrow in surprise. Come to think of it, I'm not sure I've ever seen McGonagall talk to you outside of class. Yeah, Neville said slowly with a wince. I don't think she tries to treat me different, but I can tell she also really doesn't want to spend time with me. I never really thought it was worth mentioning. It was something about my granddad when they were all in school together. Honestly, I learned early on not to ask. Young love. Luna gave them all a knowing smile, which had Ron gagging and Hermione looking like the girl had just committed blasphemy against one of her heroes. Harry shook his head with horror on his face. Yeah, mate, I don't think I would ask either, he agreed. Oh no, we need to get our robes on and get ready, Hermione exclaimed as she stood looking at her watch. Ron, we have to help get the first years together for the boats. Fine, I guess I'll catch up with you at the feast. Ron groaned and followed Hermione out to grab his robes from his trunk, and he left in the prefect carriage. Harry, Luna, and Neville all shared a carriage up to the castle. Harry was surprised to see that the Thestrals pulling the carriage, since they'd been invisible to him before he had seen Cedric Diggory die just a few months before, and he was even more surprised when they weren't afraid of him, as every other animal besides Hedwig had been. Thestrals are lovely creatures, Luna assured him as she petted one, the one that would be pulling their carriage, after explaining what they were to her new friend. I'll take you to see them in the forest soon. I think you'd particularly enjoy the colts. I don't think I'd call a skeletal horse a lovely creature, Neville said with a grin from where he'd held the door open to the carriage. Interesting might be the better adjective. No, Luna's right. They're definitely lovely, Harry said quietly, the horse's aura pulling him in. It seemed to welcome him as a new friend and kindred spirit when he reached out and ran a hand across its long nose. Thank you, Luna. I'd love to see the colts. Let me know any day. Luna grabbed his hand and pulled him behind her into the carriage. Of course, Harry. I have so many things to show you. By the end of the welcoming feast, Harry wished he was back in the basement of Grimmauld and never had to leave. She's not here for me. She's not here for me. Harry kept repeating over and over in his mind as he followed along behind where the new first years were being led to the Gryffindor Tower by Ron and Hermione. The new ministry official that had taken over Defense Against the Dark Arts was going to give him a nervous breakdown. If she found out what he was, he could kiss spending time with his friends and being out in the normal world goodbye. If all the Dementors guarded Azkaban, then the Ministry must have some way of making them stay there, and Harry didn't want to find out what that way might be. I'll just keep my head down and not cause any troubles, Harry promised himself, trying not to remember how ineffectual that had been in the past. Harry sat on the edge of his bed in the fifth-year boys' dorm. Hogwarts wasn't as he remembered it. Well, it was, but he was different. Gryffindor Tower was no longer a comfortable and safe feeling haven for him. The reds were too bright and the gold wasn't shiny at all. Something about its location in the castle and aura just weren't right either. For the first time since his sorting, he wished he hadn't talked the head out of putting him in Slytherin. The dungeon sounded like a much more enjoyable location. He was actually happy he couldn't sleep anymore because he was certain the uncomfortable aura of the tower would keep him awake, tossing and turning every night. As was becoming usual with his new pet, Harry was also concerned about leaving Jamie alone and defenseless in the room. He trusted his dorm mates, but the soulless body couldn't take care of itself. What if something happened when he wasn't here to look after for? What if he wasn't there to look out for it? Or what if Ron tried to waking up and realized he wasn't responsive? The Dementor decided to pull a page from Hermione's book and take out his anxieties on research. As soon as the last boy in the dorm pulled his curtains closed, Harry left Jamie and wandered out of the tower, invisible in the shadows. There had to be a book on wards and security spells in the library. If he could find a ward to place on his bed or Jamie himself, to alert the Dementor to danger or someone trying to wake him up, then he would breathe much easier. Hedwig met him halfway to the library and flew along beside him, keeping him company. I'm looking for a book on wards, Hedwig, Harry told her in a series of inhuman screeches, while he scratched her head with a long skeletal finger. If you can read, then hoot if you see one. The owl flew on the top of a bookshelf and ignored the instructions. It was almost too easy to sneak about now. He didn't need his invisibility cloak, and since he hovered instead of walked, he made absolutely no noise as he searched for the library. He didn't even need a light to read by, since he didn't have eyes and was using some sort of extrasensory vision thing to see with. He didn't even think Snape could catch him now. It almost took all the fun out of it, though it would be beyond funny if Snape were to walk into the library to see a Dementor hovering at a desk and reading a book with an owl beside him. Harry chuckled quietly at the thought. Harry's nighttime sneaking paid off with an entire shelf of warding books. He pulled one on medical wards, one on security wards, and one geared towards parents for their children. Why was this in a school library? Anyway, he settled into a long night of research and studying up on wards. Sometimes it was nice not to need to sleep anymore. Chapter 5. The House Elves Ambassador. Neville, Dean, Seamus, and Ron were surprised on their first morning of class with a wide-awake Harry Potter rushing them to make it down to breakfast on time. Harry was normally up first after being forced awake to cook for the Dursleys his entire life, but he was always finishing up homework or doing something else, and absolutely never wanted to go to breakfast. Oh, Harry, Jamie would let me sleep a little longer and be late to breakfast. Ron grumbled. He was usually the one trying to get food before class. It was just so early, though. Hey, cat. Might you? Thank you. Harry paused in pulling Neville out from under his covers at the code word. He thought for a minute, then seemed to decide that he was showing an acceptable level of strangeness. Ron, you know you're going to grumble all day and be irritable if you don't get your breakfast, Harry warned. Hermione always says that it's important to eat in the mornings. I didn't think you ever listened to her, though, Ron muttered as he stumbled out of his bed and towards the bathrooms. Who's Jamie? Dean asked while he seemed to be having a hard time tying his tie, still being half asleep. Now that Neville was out of his bed, Harry turned to grabbing all his belongings impatiently. He's just a new friend of ours. We're basically pen pals since he doesn't go here, Harry explained before tying Dean's tie for him. To hurry things along faster. I'm really starting to see why we miss breakfast so many mornings, he muttered when Dean smiled at him thankfully. You never cared before. Seamus grabbed his bag and huffed out of the dorm and down the stairs, making sure with his attitude that Harry knew he was still angry and didn't believe his story that Voldemort had returned for a second. Well, I'm on a new health kick, Harry explained to an apologetic-looking Dean with a shrug at Seamus' actions. It hurt him, but he had much bigger problems than a prat of a roommate. He hadn't realized his habits were so bad before all this until his dorm mates thought it was strange for him to make reasonably healthy decisions. Jamie needed taking care of since he couldn't take care of himself, though. I plan to eat 3 healthy meals a day and get a reasonable amount of sleep every night. More than a few Gryffindors and even some faculty members were impressed and a little surprised when the entire fifth-year boys' dorm made it down to breakfast on time and fully dressed for the first time ever. Hermione was even more impressed when Harry put eggs, fruit, and some oatmeal on his plate and seemed determined to eat it all. Wow, Harry! She smiled as all the other fifth-year boys sleepily grabbed bacon and toast. Have you actually been listening to my health talks all these years? Harry grinned at her as she speared a strawberry. I always listen, Hermione. I don't always care, though. She threw a bit of egg at him and laughed. Well, at least you won't be hungry for a fun day of transfiguration, defense against the dark arts, and double potions. All the fifth-year boys groaned dramatically and turned back to their breakfast. Transfiguration, as usual for a first day, was just McGonagall going over the syllabus for the term and explaining what they would be covering in their OWL year. Harry didn't even have to use magic, so he breathed a sigh of relief at the reprieve. He was also happy that during classes no one was especially excited or happy. It was much easier to pretend he was a normal human when he wasn't hungry. Hermione and Ron both had to stop him from playing with his locket a few times since there was a beam of light from the window that just touched his desk and he could get the locket to shine in the light. Overall, there weren't any major slips though, and he went to his first defense against the dark arts class, hopeful that the day would continue smoothly. Yeah, right. It only took 10 minutes before Harry decided that he hated Umbridge even more than Voldemort. Yes, Voldemort was a murdering psychopath, but at least the man was honest about it. Umbridge was going to get them all killed, smiling in their faces and telling them that it was for their own good. As the Toad Woman went through her asinine spiel about how nothing was wrong and they didn't need to learn to protect themselves, all of Harry's classmates kept glancing at him to see when he'd finally blow up and yell at her. Whether they believed him or not, they all knew his temper and that he was reaching his breaking point. Keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself. Harry kept repeating on himself over and over again. The last thing he needed was a ministry official paying him any attention. Specifically this one that looked extremely angry and confused when she saw him walk into the class like she hadn't expected him to have been here. If Voldemort had killed him over the summer, it would have been in all the papers though. And supposedly she didn't even believe Voldemort was back, so why would she think he wouldn't have made it back to school? Harry was confused and angry and frustrated that he couldn't just release his aura and scare the living daylight out of the evil woman. He made it almost all the way through class, and even Hermione had kept her mouth shut in her confusion that Harry hadn't risen to the woman's bait. Only a few more minutes to go. Mr. Potter! Umbridge turned her beady eyes directly on Harry, who stifled a groan. I'm glad to see the summer has changed your attitude for the better and brought you to see reason. Lying and saying he who must not be named has returned is very naughty of you, causing fear when none was founded. Yeah, there was only so much one Dementor can take, and this was it. Professor Umbridge. Harry smiled at her just as sweetly and fake as she was smiling at the class. Of course Voldemort has returned, he said as if addressing a small child. Cedric Diggory didn't just drop dead of a stroke at 17 now, did he? I can give you a very good description of Voldemort if you want to write up the report for the ministry. He's now about 6 foot, with red eyes, no nose and no hair, a very snake-like appearance, to be honest. He still loves torture and the killing curse, though. He did try the Imperius on me as well. Also, the Death Eaters who were in the cemetery with him were Malfoy, McNair, Avery. You must be quiet this instant! Umbridge yelled out before calming herself and plastering the fake smile on her face once more. I see, you are still a liar. We all know you to be. Attention, Mr. Potter. Let's see if we can listen in honesty to sink into your adult brain. Harry shrugged and surreptitiously pulled some of the happiness from the pink woman towards himself. She cleared her throat and hurried to the front of the room quickly. The Dementor hid a smirk behind a hand and enjoyed the impromptu snack tremendously. That wasn't the smartest idea, Hermione sighed as they walked out of the classroom and towards the dungeons. I tried, Hermione. I really did. Harry told her sadly. Can you honestly say you would have done better? I saw you biting your tongue when you realized she wasn't actually going to teach us anything. You wanted to tell her off just as much as I did. I know. His friend draped an arm around his shoulders. She's going to cause you trouble, though. Well, she's a defense against the dark arts, Professor. Ron added in as if that explained everything. When his friends looked at him questioningly, he expanded. When haven't we had a Dada instructor that hasn't tried to kill or seriously harm Harry? Even Lupin almost killed us, even if it wasn't intentional. That's actually very true, Harry mused as they neared potions. And surprisingly, Snape has only ever saved my life, even though he's the obvious one to try and kill me. Huh. Ron stopped and thought about that as Hermione pushed him towards class again. If I have a feeling if Snape wanted you dead, you'd already be dead, and no one would ever find the body. Hermione remarked unhelpfully and also very truthfully. I'm a little harder to kill than people give me credit for. Harry grinned at her mischievously as they entered the potions classroom and found empty seats. There weren't very many books on Dementors. The only mentions of them he'd found so far in the library at Grimmauld, since he'd been more focused on warding during his one trip to the Hogwarts library, had remarked that there basically was no way to kill them completely, only chase them off. It was an interesting thought, but Jamie was much more fragile, so that was his main concern at the moment. Be seated and quiet, Snape bellowed into the classroom in a wave of intimidation. Harry stared at him impressed. However he made his aura do the power intimidation thing he was making it do. Harry wanted to know. He hadn't been able to feel and distinguish auras before his change, but now he was very in tune, and Snape seemed to have an excellent handle and control over his own aura. The potions master didn't seem to notice the impressed and interested look he was getting from his least favorite student as he went into the overly dramatic lecture on OWLs, and how this would be the last time he would have many of them in his potions class. Harry rolled his eyes as Snape glared directly at Neville when he said that. Neville shifted nervously in his seat, but definitely looked more than a little happy that this would be his last year in potion. Cauldrons out! Snape snapped at them all as he waved his wand and caused copious notes to appear on the chalkboard at the front of the room. Harry had just shoved a large bite of his dinner in his mouth when a whirlwind of blonde hair with a rainbow jumper sat beside him. How was your first day? Luna asked as she took the roll off of Harry's plate to eat. Hey, Luna! Hermione smiled at the Ravenclaw with a surprised look on her face, not sure why she was joining them at the Gryffindor table. Umbridge! Harry grimaced as he put another roll on his plate to replace the stolen one. He's already gotten detention. Ron snitched on him, and Harry gave him a glare. Luna sighed and shook her head. It was probably inevitable, she remarked airily. So, you coming with me to the forest tonight? She changed the subject like Harry knew exactly what she was talking about. It took him a minute to think about why Luna would want him to go to the Forbidden Forest with her before he remembered their discussion by the carriage the night before. Oh, the Thestrals! Yeah, I'd love to come. Just give me a few more bites, he said happily and shoved another bite of tasteless chicken in his mouth. No, Harry, Luna shrugged as she continued to pick at her pilfered roll. The fourth-year Ravens had Umbridge today, too. They want to start some kind of study group since it seems like we aren't actually going to learn anything this year. That's a great idea, Luna! Hermione jumped at the suggestion. Who's going to lead it? Harry shook her head sadly. That's the problem. We haven't had very many competent defense against the dark arts professors, and no one has any ideas about who could lead us yet, the Ravenclaw said with a pointed shift of her eyes over to Harry that only Hermione saw. Ah, yes, that is a problem. Hermione nodded with a little smile to Luna. I'll give it some thought as well. I'm sure we can come up with something. What do Festrels eat, Luna? Harry asked between bites. I'd like to bring something along for them. Don't worry, I've got it covered, Luna grinned. Do either of you want to come? She asked Ron and Hermione. They can't see them. Harry shook his head, answering for his friends. What are Festrels? Ron asked, mouth still full of mashed potatoes. Everyone grimaced in disgust as Hermione went into a long lecture about an animal she couldn't see herself. And they're really very lovely, Harry added on to the end. Unless the pictured Ron in the textbook was completely wrong, I'm going to have to disagree with Harry on that one. Hermione raised an eyebrow at her friend. What is beauty? Luna questions with a faraway look on her face. Many say the crumplehorn snorkack isn't beautiful, but the Fresselbees are drawn to them. They must find their host beautiful in some way. Okay, start with the crumplehorn snorkack and then tell me about the Fresselbees, Harry asked with interest as he finished his dinner. Ron and Hermione shared a look before talking about the twins' new choke product and tuning the other two out. Halfway to the forest, Luna started skipping backwards in front of Harry with a broad grin on her face. So, Harry, I'm very interested to know how exactly does a person become a Dementor when they've always been a human before? Harry threw his arms up at a loss. No clue. 1 minute I'm getting the soul sucked of my body and knowing it's a game over. Then the next I'm checking out my noseless and eyeless face. While the Dementor who turned me strolled away all unconcerned and unhelpful. That's odd. Luna frowned in consideration. I thought Dementors spawn in mist, and that's how they multiply. I've never heard of someone being turned into a Dementor before. Harry shook his head as he forcibly turned Luna around again before she ran into a tree. I looked around my godfather's library but couldn't find anything about it. I'm checking Hogwarts library next, but I was more concerned with wards for Jamie last night, so I haven't looked yet. Jamie? Luna asked as she peered around the trees looking for the Festrels. Harry blushed, not realizing his slip. I kind of named the Harry's suit. It's not really a part of me anymore, and, well, I feel bad for the poor bugger. Old me, I guess. Anyways, I've come to think of him as like a pet, sort of. If I don't take care of him, he'll just waste away and die. Plus, I'd like to keep him around so I can still pass as a human at least a little. Luna stopped at the edge of a clearing and smiled brightly at Harry, her blue eyes sparkling. It's good to meet you, Jamie, she said to her friend. He can't answer you back. Harry chuckled. So less, I'd love to study him sometimes. She cocked her head musingly to see what's left in there and how it's still connected to magic. Seeing Harry's frown, she quickly added in nervous explanation. I'm sorry, it's a fairy thing. Seeing magic all around us makes us curious how things interact. I didn't mean like study, just, observe. I'm not making this any better, am I? Harry smiled again as a couple of Festrels wandered into the clearing. I just don't like the idea of being studied. He shrugged. I'll think about it, all right? Sure. Luna breathed out a sigh of relief and pulled some raw steak from her bag. Here you go, lovely, she said to a small, awkward colt that stumbled forward. He is beautiful, Harry breathed out in wonder at the tiny horse. His aura was so full of life and wonder. I can't wait to see one fly sometime. Here, give them this, and they will definitely let you pet them. The fairy handed over a piece of raw meat. Harry and Luna stayed and played with the baby Festrel until the sun sank down below the horizon. It was so peaceful and uncomplicated with the horses in the forest. After thanking her for showing him where the Thestrals live, Harry made plans to visit with Luna again next week. "Don't eat anyone, I wouldn't," Luna called after him with a wave as they parted in the entrance hall. Harry just shook his head and made his way back to Gryffindor Tower to tell Ron, Hermione, and Neville all about the baby Thestral. Harry's second night back at Hogwarts saw him wandering out of the tower once more. This time he left Jamie behind under a crap ton of warts, though. He was certain he'd find a few more to add in the coming weeks as well. At this point, though, no one could open the curtains if they tried. He'd know if anything spiked with Jamie's heart rate or respiration. Harry would know if any loud noises happened around the bed. He'd know if any magic was cast within a meter of his bed. He'd be notified. He knew he was paranoid, but well, people had been trying to kill him since he was born, and they had essentially succeeded over the summer. He wasn't ready to live as a Dementor full time. Establishing a routine, Hedwig met him halfway to the library again. "I'm not always going to be researching, girl," he told her in quiet screeches. "One of these days, we're going to go flying again, or go to the forest." Hedwig hooted in agreement, not really liking being cooped up in the library herself. This time Harry was looking for books on Dementors. He needed to find out what had happened to him, and if it was reversible, and how the Ministry might be making the other Dementors stay at Azkaban. He had a small stack of books before a quiet pop sounded in the library. "Mr. Harry Potter, sir?" A squeaky voice whispered out into the library questioningly. Harry put down the books on a nearby table after jumping out of his robes, and looked around the shelf in surprise, staying invisible in the shadows. Dobby, the house elf, was almost quaking in fear from where he was standing in the corner of the library by the circulation desk, pulling on his purple knitted hat that Harry recognized was one of the ones Hermione made. "Mr. Harry Potter, sirs? Dobby needs to speak with you," the house elf said in a whisper again as he wrung his hands anxiously. Harry had expected at some point to have either a house elf confrontation or the fifth-year boys' dorm to never be clean and the elves to go on strike out of fear, but he hadn't expected Dobby to come alone and to find him. "I don't know if you can understand me now, Dobby," Harry called out as quietly as he could in the Dementor language, still invisible to his anxious friend. "If you can, you should know that I'd never hurt you." Dobby let out a sigh of relief, but looked around the shelves for Harry. "I can't understand, sir. Where are you?" "Do you know what I am, Dobby?" he asked sadly, not planning to come out until he was sure Dobby already knew what he was. There was no way he was going to reveal himself if the house elf didn't. "Yes, sirs. That's why Dobby's been sent to by the other house elves. Dobby says to them that Mr. Harry Potter would never hurt an elf, but they be scared. They says that Dobby needs to go make sure the Dementor doesn't like the taste of elves." Dobby rushed out in an apologetic tone. Harry finally drifted out behind the shelf and dispelled the magic keeping him invisible. "Hey, Dobby." The Dementor gave his friend a little sheepish wave. "I didn't mean to scare the elves." Dobby jumped, but then took in Harry's appearance. Yes, he was a Dementor, but he was hunched over into himself and trying to make himself as small as possible. His hood was pulled low over his face to cover it completely, and there was absolutely no aura emanating from him. Hedwig was sitting on the table between them, keeping an eye on the interaction. Even for a Dementor, Harry looked rough. "He knows his friends," Dobby said with a little sob before he rushed over and wrapped his little arms around them the Dementor's waist. Harry couldn't cry. He didn't even have eyes. He was certain if he could, he would be, though. Instead, he patted the tiny back of the elf that was holding him tightly. "Thank you, Dobby," he croaked out. "You need not to take better care of yourself." Dobby pulled back and admonished the Dementor, shaking a little finger at him warningly. "Have you been eating well? Students are happy at dinner. You need to eat too. Days won't miss a little happy. Quidditch is happy, and Saturdays, Mr. Harry Potter needs foods like all students." "I've only been here 2 days, Dobby." Harry chuckled in surprise. He couldn't believe Dobby was telling him to make sure to take some of the happiness from around him, or maybe he could. Dobby was always a strange elf. "Well, you didn't eat well before you got here, then." Dobby frowned. The Dementor shrugged. "I've had a bit. I'm not too hungry." The house elf crossed his arms and stamped his foot. "You eat at least once a week from now on. I know you've been feeding your other body. Take care of this one too. Dobby will send Winky to find you if you don't." Harry wasn't sure how Winky was a threat, but since Dobby had tried to get him expelled and almost killed him, trying to protect him, if he thought Winky was a threat, then Harry was certain the little elf would probably be hella scary. He didn't want to take that chance. "Yes, sir, Dobby, sir," he said with a little laugh. Dobby nodded and grinned broadly at his friend. "Now, I tell the other elves you know danger." "Please tell them I'm not going to hurt them or anyone else. If I do skim some happiness, I'll make sure to do so. It isn't noticeable, okay?" Harry promised. "You's better, or Winky," Dobby warned, still grinning. Hedwig hooted in agreement from where she was perched on the table. Dobby, could you ask them not to tell anyone, please, like the headmaster?" Harry asked, sinking into himself a little more. Dobby scoffed and gave Harry a little chuckle. "Harry Potter, sirs, you're not the only magical creature in this school. House elves have been taking care of the students since Hogwarts began. We follows the rules in the school. All students are fed and cared for, no matter what they are, and we's no snitches." Harry, really? Harry tilted his head, wondering who else could be a magical creature besides himself and Luna. "I bet I'm your first Dementor, though, right?" he asked with just a little bit of irrational pride at that. Dobby laughed and nodded. "Yes, that's why the elves were a little worried. They follow the Hogwarts rules, though use easier than Wendigos anyway. They don't eat humans anymore, but they have specific diets, and Aswangs are allergic to their foods, so we has to keep everything separate when we have both in school." Harry's eyes would have widened in surprise if he had any. Just how many magical creatures are at Hogwarts? "It changes based on the year." Dobby smiled and shrugged. We've never tell." "Wow, thank you, Dobby." Harry chuckled. He'd have to talk to Luna at some point. She obviously knew more than she was letting on if she could tell who was all the magical creatures here. "I'll take better care of myself and not eat anyone in the process." Dobby nodded. "Okay, the elves will be happy," he said with a little pop as he apparated out again. "Hedwig, I have a feeling this year is going to get weird," he remarked as he patted her head. Hedwig hooted out a little chuckle before they returned to their research into Dementors. Chapter 6. Classes that should be dropped. Harry hadn't had time to get through all the books which might mention the Mentors he had pulled the night before. However, the little he had read and his recent experiences, Harry firmly decided that he should have dropped care of magical creatures like he would have an evil baby Voldemort that happened to be on fire and shooting poisonous darts from his eyes. As it was, he walked out of the castle like he was walking to a funeral and doing his best to hide behind Ron and Hermione. Professor Grubbly Plank was filling in for Hagrid while he was away on the super hush-hush mission that no one would talk about in Harry's presence. By the looks of it, this lesson was going to be a disaster. Ron concernedly glanced at Harry, who was trying to disappear behind his taller friend, while the unicorns standing in the front of the class eyed the Dementor and stamped their hoofs. You heard from Jamie recently, mate. Ron grumbled as Harry tried to pull him backwards to get more space between them and the angry horned horses. I'm sorry, class. I don't know what in Merlin's good name has gotten into the unicorns today. Professor Grubbly Plank acknowledged in confusion while she moved between the mystical horses and the students a little more. They're usually very docile creatures and pacifists to the extreme. I don't think the unicorns like Jamie. Harry hissed quietly in Ron's ear. You think? Ron hissed back, becoming more concerned as the unicorns started pacing and kept shooting murderous looks towards his friends and lowering their horns. What you do, Harry? Hermione accused when she joined Ron, blocking Harry in concern. Nothing, I promise. I've never heard a unicorn before, I swear. Harry anxiously squeaked back, loud enough for the unicorns to hopefully hear and stand down. Apparently that didn't help matters at all. Instead, the two largest horses pushed past Professor Grubbly Plank, knocking her onto her bum as they rushed towards the Dementor in disguise. Harry would refuse to believe when told later that he squealed like Ferret Malfoy as he ran from behind Ron, away from the charging unicorns. Don't run in a straight line! Zigzag! The professor yelled out as the rest of the class seemed to grow from horrified shock to laughter and began back again with each zigzag. It's a good thing Professor Grubbly Plank was able to finally hit you with a levitation spell. Ron sighed as he helped his friend shuffle towards the castle. I thought you were a goner there for a minute. Hermione shook her head in amused disbelief at her friend had almost been mauled by unicorns. Me too, Ron. Me too, Hermione. Harry grumbled as he held his bleeding arm. It's not like I ever hurt one of them. That's just rude. I even helped stop Moldy first year when he was attacking them. They should be thanking me instead of trying to shish kebab me. Harry, that looks worse than when Voldemort was scratched by the hippogriff in third year. We really need to get you to the hospital wing. Hermione inspected the wound as they reached the doors to the castle. The rest of the class were still down by the forest listening to a lecture on unicorns without the unicorns present once Professor Grubbly Plank had persuaded them to return to the forest and leave the fifth year alone. Harry really didn't want to go to the hospital wing and have Madame Pomfrey scan him and maybe figure out the whole Harry-Jamie situation. He was bleeding quite a lot, though, and Jamie needed medical attention. Fine, he sighed in resignation, and they made their way through the hallway. What in Salazar's name have you gotten yourself into this time, Potter? A silky voice stopped them from behind in an exasperated tone. Sighing in resignation once again, Harry, Ron, and Hermione turned to acknowledge the potions professor. He was attacked by a unicorn, sir, Hermione explained. Professor Grubbly Plank sent us to take him to Madame Pomfrey. Snape stared at them with an unreasonable expression on his face. You were attacked by a unicorn? Snape asked slowly in disbelief. Harry's eyes narrowed when he finally recognized the twitch at the corner of the professor's mouth and the well-concealed gleam in his eye as a wave of his professor's emotion hit the Dementor's senses. Snape was trying not to laugh at him. It was not funny. This isn't funny, sir. Those menaces are bloody lethal. Harry groaned out indignantly. 5 points from Gryffindor for language, Mr. Potter. Snape drawled, just a little of his humour slipping out from behind his expressionless mask. Only you could be exasperating enough to get an animal known for peace and love to attack. Harry refrained from rolling his eyes and glared instead. I'm bleeding on the floor, sir. Do you think I could possibly head to the hospital wing now? He asked dryly. Snape just smirked at him and pulled a large jar of something out from a deep pocket in his robe. Essence of myrtlap, he said as he handed it over. That cut isn't even worth going to the hospital wing. Put it on twice a day for the next 3 days and you'll be fine. Physically, that is. I sadly can't do anything about your abysmal mental state. The 3 students stared at the jar in surprise. Did Snape just help them? Well, Madame Pomfrey probably would have given him the same thing, also brewed by the professor, so this was just cutting out the middleman. But still, it felt like Snape just helped him. Thank you, sir. Harry stared at the jar of healing cream and ignored the expected insult about his mental state. Snape smirked at their confusion and pushed past them in a billow of ropes. I better not hear about any of you missing class. He called them back at them sternly. Ron snorted while Hermione pushed Harry's sleeve back and started putting the cream onto the cut. Well, if that's not proof that Malfoy was being completely ridiculous further, then I don't know what is. Ron huffed in irritation, while the cut got noticeably smaller. Let's grab some food. Lunch is starting soon. Harry smiled at his friends, who both mumbled something about Jamie. History of Magic is next, he remarked as he ignored them, both, and headed towards the Great Hall. At least no bloody demented horses would be attacking in a history class. Harry stared at his transparent professor and wished more than ever before that he was able to sleep. Staying awake in History of Magic was just torture. While doodling on his notes, he analyzed the ethics of eating a ghostly spirit. The man was already dead, so it's not like he was in a body. He would also be doing all the students a favor by getting rid of an incompetent teacher. And Dobby had told him to eat. Harry pushed down his hunger that welled up at the thought. Maybe he was a little too close to this decision, he figured. He'd asked Luna since he couldn't really trust the Dementor to make an ethical decision that wasn't based on hunger and boredom in the moment. He drew a line at the bottom of his notes and started a letter to his fairy friend instead. Dear Luna, as you can see, I'm in History of Magic and ridiculously bored. So serious question. You told me not to eat anyone you wouldn't eat. Would you eat Professor Binns? He's already dead and so boring. I'm fairly certain he'd be quite tasty too. So your opinion, is it ethical to eat my history professor? Anxiously waiting your response, Harry and Jamie. Knowing Luna had a free period just then, Harry whistled and waited. Hedwig flew into the room from the open window moments later and landed on his desk besides Hermione glaring at him in reproach and a couple of classmates, Ron included, grumbling in their sleep. No one noticed or cared about the owl. At least all of the ghostly professor droning on up by the chalkboard. Harry smiled unrepentantly at Hermione and tied the letter to Hedwig's leg, pulling an owl treat out of his pocket and handing it over as well. "That's for Luna, dear," he whispered. Hedwig hooted as she happily snapped up the treat and flew back out the window. Hermione glared at him one more time for good measure before turning back to her notes. Harry's halfway finished notes were returned to him at the dinner with a message from Luna at the bottom. "Harry, no, you may not eat our history professor. Besides drawing unwanted attention to yourself, he is a sentient being, even if he isn't currently alive. Just because he's boring doesn't mean he deserves to die." "Fine," Harry grumbled out and ate another bite of carrots before glaring over at the grinning blonde at the Ravenclaw table. "On another note, are you free on Thursday night next week? I have something else you might like to see. You in? Luna." Harry turned back to his smiling friend and wrinkled his nose to show his frustration. He then smiled and nodded about Thursday. Luna grinned back and waved. "What was that about?" Hermione asked when Luna turned back to them. When Harry turned back to them, "Luna said I couldn't kill Binns." Harry pouted and took a sip of pumpkin juice. "Pineapple!" Ron sidestepped his steak with a fork. "Jamie was the code word," Hermione reminded him with a long-suffering sigh. "Well, apparently that code word wasn't doing anything." The red-haired glared at both his friends, waving a steak-laden fork. "I hear you. I just ignore you sometimes." Harry smirked at them. "Harry, in second year, what did we brew in the girls' bathroom?" Ron asks in all seriousness. "Polyjuice potion," the Dementor responded with a questioning eyebrow raise. "Just checking." Ron shook his head. "Sometimes I still wonder." Harry shrugged and stood from his bench. "I have detention with Umbridge. See you all later." "Harry, be careful," Hermione called after him in worry. Her friend smiled at her warmly before turning and heading out of the door. Harry looked at his left hand in surprise. "I must not tell lies" appeared carved into his skin. Did Umbridge do what he thought she had done? Harry's eyes shot up to the evil professor who was smiling sweetly at him over the top of her floral teacup. Yep, this was all her doing. She was intentionally harming Jamie. For one very intense moment, Harry really did seriously consider eating her soul, or at least sucking out all of the happiness and joy she'd ever felt from her evil toad body. Harry took a deep breath and felt the jar of essence of myrtlap in his pocket that Snape had given him earlier. Promising that he'd heal Jamie shortly, Harry pushed down his murderous anger. If Snape hadn't given him a means of taking care of Jamie, he was positive he wouldn't have been able to dampen his Dementor instincts. Umbridge had no clue how close she had come to a disaster. For now. Breathing in deeply, Harry felt Umbridge's soul. He knew she would taste like candy floss. Nope. Don't think about that. He shook his head and started writing again. The pain helped him concentrate his thoughts and not think about eating the evil Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Well, he may still have thought about it. He did like candy floss. But no, he wouldn't eat her, not even a little. If Luna said he couldn't eat Binns, then he definitely couldn't eat Umbridge. Maybe he would ask Luna. Though Luna could change her mind. "Hermione, you mind helping me with this?" Harry asked as he put the jar of jar Snape had given him on the table in front of where Ron and Hermione were studying when he stumbled back into Gryffindor Tower after his detention. He was having a hard time opening the jar with his injured hand. Hermione easily opened it and motioned for him to show her the cut from earlier. No, this first, he sighed as he held his hand out for her to see. What in the bloody hells? Ron growled as he stood up and examined Harry's hand. Several of the other students looked up from their homework or activities at Ron's outburst, but quickly brushed it off and went back to what they were doing. Umbridge, Harry explained with a murderous look still on his face. Did she have you writing lines with a blood quill or something? Ron asked. Harry's hand held just centimeters from his eyes as he looked at the bloody mess sober. Ron, let me look at it, Hermione protested as she reached up to pull Harry's hand away. If a blood quill is a quill that writes in your own blood while you use it, then yeah. Harry sighed when Hermione grabbed his hand and pulled it over to his face to study. Harry, those are highly illegal. Ron had put a hand on his friend's shoulder in comfort. We need to tell someone. She's the undersecretary to the minister. Who are we going to tell? Harry asked in seriousness, already having spent the last 2 hours thinking that through while carving into Jamie's hand. Dumbledore or McGonagall? Hermione asked while she slathered the cream onto his hand and then the unicorn injury. Both already in trouble with the ministry. Harry frowned in frustration. They wouldn't have sent Umbridge here if they were happy with the headmaster and the deputy headmistress. And it's not like I have any parents to complain to. Snuffle would storm into the school and curse her, getting himself arrested again. Then I'd have to break him out of prison. Then we'd have to go on the run and to maybe Tahiti, and I could be sitting on a warm beach right now instead of freezing my arse off. Maybe we should tell Snuffles. Harry smirked at the end. Hermione smacked the back of his head with her hand. It's still summer. It's not even cold right now, so stop complaining. She chastised. Harry pulled his robes even closed more, not commenting on the fact that he was currently wearing 3 layers and still freezing. I look over some law books in the library and see if there's any way we could get around her to get her kicked out of the school. Harry offered his brilliant friend. Hermione smiled at him and Ron groaned. Oh, that means we have to go to research too, doesn't it? Yes, Ron, it'll do you good. Hermione smacked him upside the head next. Now, bed, both of you. Yes, Mom. They both laughed, dodging throwing books as they headed up to their dormitories. Not that I don't love spending time with you, Luna, but where are we going? Harry asked as he was pulled down another corridor deeper into the castle next Thursday evening. Thankfully, a night he didn't have detention with Umbridge. Luna stopped immediately and turned to smile at him, sweetly. Harry was certain he'd agree to just about anything when she said when she turned her large blue eyes on him like that. Well, anything until she opened her mouth and said, Remedial potions! You had better be kidding, Luna. Lovegood. Harry gaped in shock. Potions might not be my best subject, but I do pretty decent when I'm not being sabotaged. Now, nowhere near needing remedial potions. Plus, it's only 1 week into the new term. Why would any study group be starting up this early? I'm Gryffindor, not Ravenclaw, remember? I'm top of my year in potions, Luna informed him with a mischievous grin. Harry was shocked. He hadn't expected that. So, this is a joke? Where are we really going? No, I'm listed as a tutor. Luna grinned once more and pulled the Dementor down another hallway. Sorry, Harry, I don't think we can pass you off as a potions tutor. We're going to have to tell people you're actually taking it. What makes you think I'll take remedial potions willingly? Harry sputtered indignantly. Hey, cat. Luna pushed him into an alcove and blocked his exit. She waved her wand, throwing up an impressive silencing ward. To Harry's surprise and academic interest, because it's not actually remedial potions, it's just our cover, she explained with a roll of her eyes. We're more of a secret society. The society started back in the early 1800s, and the secret has been kept successfully from the faculty, students, and all headmasters except for two since then, and those two were both former members. You're taking me to a secret society? Harry asked with a little excitement creeping into his voice. That's awesome. Yes, Luna giggled. We're the Hogwarts Society of Magical Creatures. For the millionth time in that one conversation, Harry's jaw dropped in shock. We're going to meet other magical creatures at Hogwarts. Of course, silly! The blonde Ravenclaw berated him with an indulgent grin. Wait, wouldn't the headmaster or at least Snape notice if there was a random remedial potions class meeting? Well, we haven't always been potions. Luna leaned against the wall, getting comfortable for a long explanation. We've been remedial divination, remedial charms, and many others. Just depending on who our faculty sponsor is. Most of the sponsors all have been past members, though we did have a branch out just a few years in there when there wasn't a magical creature on staff. Snape's your sponsor. Harry grimaced and crossed his arms in stubborn irritation. He is. Now calm down and listen to me. Harry, you need this. Luna pinned him with a glare. The Dementor pouted a bit but motioned for her to continue explaining. Anyway, there are several rules you are going to have to follow to be a part of the society. And rule number 1 is that house rivalry is checked out at the door. We all face enough discrimination as it is. This is a safe space where rivalry is off limits. Harry nodded, understanding the rule completely. I can do that, he agreed wholeheartedly. Second is that no matter how someone acts outside of the club or how bad you treat each other inside the club, we're family and each other support. We all have different ways of hiding our identities and different expectations. Expectations from our families. But whatever you do outside the club doesn't come into the room. Luna looked at him significantly. Harry figured that if Snape behaved himself, he could too. He wasn't the one that started things anyway. Okay, I think I can do that. Great! Luna beamed at him. Next is very important, but you'll never ask what creature anyone is. They'll tell you when they're comfortable, and they'll afford you the same courtesy. I feel it goes without saying that you never out a creature to anyone inside or outside the club either, right? Harry liked that rule. He didn't plan on telling anyone he was a Dementor anytime soon. That's good. I like that. Okay, you ready? Luna took his hand supportively. Is there anyone else like that you that can figure out what I am? Harry asked tentatively. Luna shook her head. No, there aren't any other fairies in the school, and you said the house elves already know. Besides the fairies and sirens, of which there aren't any in the school right now, magical creatures that passed as human don't have quite the refined senses that our more animalistic counterparts do. Even werewolves wouldn't be able to tell what you were just by scent. You're safe until you want to tell them. Taking a deep breath, Harry nodded. Okay, let's do this. Luna cancelled her ward and led him further into the dungeons, only stopping when they approached a classroom that Harry didn't remember ever being used for anything. "Welcome to Remedial's Potions," she smiled as she opened the door to a brightly lit room with people from all years and houses milling about and laughing. "Oh, hell! What's he doing here?" a familiar voice indignantly drawled from the corner of the room, making Harry instinctively go on guard and prepare for a fight.